Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it's time for the Q&A, so let's go ahead and knock this out. All right, first question. Hey Jason, I'm currently doing squats, deadlifts, and leg curls for lower body. I used to do leg press, but it bothers my hips. Can I add box squats instead? Thanks, coach. Sure, you can add box squats. It's totally different from the leg press. You're not really using it for quite the same reasons, but yeah, you could absolutely add the box squat. In fact, it's a staple exercise for me at this point. I use it a lot. I'm programming it for all my clients. And if you're trying to get things like rate of force development, or you're trying to find a lower body exercise that puts less stress on the knees, it's actually a good way to go. I go so far as to say, and again, I've become less dogmatic about this, and I've kind of kept up with the times and what coaches are doing. It might be a good idea to do a larger amount of your actual training volume with the box squat. And it's something I've discussed in other videos that have come out. Things that are worth looking at is that the box squat itself might be better for your overall training volume, simply because it's easier to recover from. Other things to look at is, instead of leg curls, if you can get access to a glute ham raise, that's vastly superior. And again, this is really all you need for lower body variations for the most part. If you're trying to maximize your lower body size, squat, box squat, deadlift variations, glute ham raises will pretty much develop everything that you want. Develop everything that you want. It'll give you a tremendously thick and powerful lower body easily. But again, you can work with different variations. But the box squat's an interesting tool. It's absolutely something that I recommend at this point. And it used to be a controversial topic for me. But again, we have to change with the times. We have to change with what coaches are doing. We have to change with the data. And I think at this point, there's pretty compelling evidence to suggest that maybe all of us should be box squatting at a certain point past your novice phase. All right, next question. Hey Jason, I've reached your strength standards but still look tiny as shit next to my mate. Well, first of all, you need to tell your mate that he's not supposed to eat the entire cow and take the whole bottle of Vanadrol at one time. Right? There's part of the problem. Like, if he'd back off on doing that, you might be good to go. All right, but the joking aside, what people always need to remember, we have different strength standards for things, and I give you a strength standard out there that lets you look like you're jacked to the average person, which you do. I mean, obviously, the joking aside, the trolling aside, him kind of showing that off, Stan actually clearly looks like he lifts there. I don't think any reasonable person who's not deluded in some way is going to look at Stan and say, do you even lift, bro? Other than as a joke, because you obviously lift. You obviously are pretty jacked at that point. You're definitely bigger than the average guy who goes to a gym in terms of just overall body composition, size, all that at this point. But when it comes to overall size, you always have to remember other people are going to have you beat, and particularly when you stand next to them. And I think frame size is something that gets lost in the equation oftentimes. A lot of times someone will look pretty big standing by themselves till you put them next to someone who has a bigger frame, particularly someone who's a little taller than you, a little bit wider shoulders than you. Even if they have a similar level of development, they're going to totally dwarf you. They're going to make you look small. And it's always fascinating when you meet different people from the internet in person, or you see them next to other people. It puts stuff in perspective. It puts it into perspective very quickly. And that's something you just have to keep in mind, that we can all look big. We can all look jacked. Even without drugs. You can do it without drugs. But always remember, when you stand next to someone with a bigger frame than you, they're going to look bigger than you. They're going to look bigger than you when you stand side by side. But in this case, your friend's got even more muscle than you on top of it. So yeah, he's just going to make you look smaller. But you still look big, brother, so I really wouldn't sweat it. It's not a big deal. All right, next question. Hi, Coach. I am 18 years old with 188 kilogram body weight, power builder who is currently trying to hit your big 5 strength standards. I'm running a linear upper-lower split. I can deadlift 230 kilograms beltless, squat 175 kg, bench press 125 kg, paused, and overhead press 80 kilograms. I've been training for 1 year and 6 months. Is it time to start to implement concurrent periodization, as my gains on upper body have been very slow and I'm finding it very hard to progress much further? Thanks, Coach. Well, absolutely. What is it that we get from things like concurrent type periodization and go on to things like upper lower splits? We allow for more specialization. We allow for more training volume and more specialization. A lot of people will make the absurd argument, oh, you can't get a jacked upper body if you squat first. As a novice, you totally can. You can maximize your hypertrophy. Absolutely. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. It's complete nonsense when people say that you can't. But as you get more advanced, being able to train upper body on its own day, yeah, it matters a lot. Now, that doesn't mean people need these body part splits. This idea, well, I have to focus on just my back or just my chest. No, that's not what I'm talking about, because they don't take away from each other as much. In other words, you can walk over as a little more advanced lifter, and you could row just as much after you bench. You can row just as much after you bench than if you did it fresh. It doesn't really affect it meaningfully, but those lower body lifts will. Not when you're weak. When you're still weak, it doesn't matter. When you're still weak, it doesn't matter. But when you get more advanced and you start to build a strength base, it will start to matter. After you squat, you may not be able to bench as much. You may not be able to row as much. And it may matter in terms of total tension. Now, metabolic fatigue, it doesn't matter. People who want to use the metabolic fatigue argument, they think volume is the primary mechanism of growth, shouldn't even be having this discussion. Because if they don't care about tension that much, it's not a big deal. But the truth is, it is a big deal, and it does matter. I would say where you're at in terms of your development, now you're pretty advanced for your level of experience. To be honest, you're a little stronger than average than I would expect for an 18-year-old with a year and a half of training. So that's a good thing. That means that you've trained hard, you've put in some solid work. You should be proud of that. So I think at your level of development, I think an upper lower 4-day-a-week concurrent type periodization, you're at a good point to start that. I think that's perfectly acceptable for where you are, and if you want to train that way, I think you could benefit from it if you structure it correctly. I think it'd be a good way for you to go. I agree. All right, next question and last question of the week. Hey Jason, I recently started to train my deadlift again, and I notice I'm stronger and faster when I pull from a deficit. Last month I tried to use a higher and higher deficit from week 1 to 1 inch to week 3, 2.5 inches with the same weight. Surprisingly, they got easier, not harder. Why is that? Also, I'm not a beginner. My max squat is 475, and my max deadlift is 530 at 165. You're going to laugh at this answer. Your deadlift technique is bad. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing that's not easily correctable. You're too loose at the bottom of your deadlift. You are probably trying to just muscle the bar up instead of getting tight and pulling all the slack out correctly. So if you're just as strong on your deficits a lot of times, that means that the deficit forces you to learn to get tighter, and that you have better technique and that you get better tightness when you do a deficit. If you were to learn to carry that tightness over that you're getting onto the deficit onto your normal deadlift, you would probably be stronger. You'd probably be stronger. Now, the other more obvious thing to look at is going to be the fact that you recently started deadlifting again. Well, if you went to a harder variation with the 1 inch deficit and you pulled the same weight, that means you probably got stronger and adapted from the previous workout. So let me put it in perspective. If you deadlifted 500 pounds, and we're just using that for 1, for 3, whatever. I'm using 500 as an arbitrary number, so don't take it to heart. For X number of reps, whether it's 1, 2, 3, and you've only recently started deadlifting again, you're going to adapt to that. So you come over and you do the 1 inch deficit next time and you pull the same weight, right? It's like, man, I'm stronger at the deficit. No, you got stronger at both. You adapted from the last workout, so you're now stronger, so therefore you're able to pull it at a 1 inch. Then the next week you go over and try it at a 2 inch, but you've also had a training effect from doing the 500 from the 1 inch that you've now adapted to from a week ago. You're a hair stronger again now. You're like 0.25% stronger, so you can pull that extra inch. And then you adapt to that, and then at the 2.5, all of a sudden you can do the 500 for the same number of reps. Well, you got stronger every workout a tiny amount over the course of a month, while also using a variation that forces you to reinforce getting tighter each time. If you were to carry that same tightness over that you probably have now at the 2.5 inch, and you tried it from the normal floor again, instead of 500 for X number of reps, you might get 510. You're adapting to the training. You're getting a hair stronger week to week because you started deadlifting again. That's what's going on. But the thing to remember is that if your deficit is just as strong as your normal deadlift, that tells you something about your tightness. It means you need to work on getting tighter, pulling the slack out of the bar more, all of those things on your normal deadlift. It means you're bleeding energy. You're losing potential strength. So you need to work on that. But the deficit deadlifts will actually help you work on that. So it's not a bad thing at all. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.